is United States Senator Dr. Bill Cassidy. Dr. Bill, good morning. Welcome back to Kiel. Let's kind of start.
Hey, Robert.
Thank you, sir. Let's start here. States across the country, including our own, beginning to reopen. I guess here in Louisiana, we'll be looking at phase 2. The governor will assess, etc. As you are looking at these various states, including Louisiana, what is your sense about the way that the reopening is being conducted? Do you think who's doing a good job and who's not?
Well, if you go into a grocery store and it's crowded and you're wearing a mask, you're doing a good job. If you go into the grocery store and it's crowded and you're not, you're not.
So it's a lot simpler. It's a lot simpler than it seems. I know the times you've spoken to us recently, you talk about testing, and you think testing is a key part of reopening the states. Now, when you talk about testing, are you talking about the actual testing for coronavirus, or are you talking about antibody testing, both, and why in your mind is there a difference?
Well, right now there has to be testing for the virus itself, and it's not just testing. You have to have a strategy. If you're going to keep people in a nursing home from dying, you need to be checking the people that work there, because if it enters that population, they're at high risk of dying. And so you have to have a strategy. If you check somebody who lives in a cabin 20 miles away from everybody, probably doesn't matter because they're not going to infect other folks. But if you infect somebody who's constantly moving back and forth into a group of folks who are at high risk of having complications, that makes a difference. And so you need that sort of strategy. And by the way, the difference between an antibody and testing for the virus, an antibody just shows that you've previously had it. Most likely you're immune, whereas the virus itself says that right now it's perhaps in your body.
Dr. Bill, schools across the country, maybe they'll be opening in the fall. I know that I know here in Caddo Parish, Dr. Gorey is looking at a number of different plans. In your mind, is herd immunity, is it legit? And if you are a herd immunity kind of guy, does it make sense to have closed schools or keep schools closed when you're talking about a demographic that is, for the vast majority of kids under 18, asymptomatic?
Yeah, so great idea. Herd immunity, for folks who don't know it, if you've got enough people in your population who are immune, then the virus has a hard time spreading. Measles is very spreadable, except 95% of people have been vaccinated. So if somebody enters with measles, it doesn't have any place to go because the herd of people around that one are all immune. So that's the point. As regards the children, the children are asymptomatic, but what if their mom is a diabetic? They can spread the infection from each other to their mama. That's the fear. Now, I'm a big believer we got to reopen schools. You're only 5 once in your life. And so, although every now and then my wife says I'm acting like I'm 5. but that 1 year you're 5, your brain is a sponge. It just soaks up information. You don't want that child to miss school because that's critical for their future. It's critical for our future as a society. So we have to reopen the schools, but they can infect their parents, and we have to be aware of that.
State House has taken up a bill to move $200 million from the CARES Act that's targeted to local governments and moving it to small business grants. The governor's not in favor of it because he says the intent of the law you guys passed was to put that money back to local governments. How do you feel about that? Does it bother you a little bit that the state is kind of tinkering with this money?
So first, I want to make sure that the money is used consistent with federal law, because if it's not, then the federal government will come back and ask for it back.
Yeah.
We've had that happen before. It's kind of a mess. It's a wrench into the old state budget. And so when we passed the CARES Act, if we're speaking about the money that was for COVID relief, then that money is for COVID relief. There's some things you can do, for example, pay your first responders if they were involved with COVID relief. But I'm not sure, whatever is done has to be consistent with federal law, because otherwise we're going to have a real mess on our hands paying those dollars back. Secondly, if you talk to the mayors and the parish officials, they've had a fair amount of expense related to COVID response. Now, if there's money left over, if the local governments have not been able to use that money, and if the federal law allows it to be used for small business, I'm okay with that, because I'd rather use it here for something allowable than to give the money back when we could actually use it. So with those caveats, I'd like to see more about the issue.
I have a silly question for you, and let's see how. I have people in my life, Robert too, you do too, that are retired, and their retirement check has been coming regular. They've not been impacted. Why were people like that included in the stimulus? Can you explain that to me?
So some folks, I'd had a telephone town hall down on the North Shore, and somebody called in and said, listen, she is a retiree and didn't have a problem. So I said, the Salvation Army, you can contribute your dollars to the Salvation Army. If you go to Shreveport, the Salvation Army in Shreveport is a wonderful organization. And they've got people in there who have young children, single moms. They're getting the kids in school. They're making sure that people on drugs have an avenue out of drugs. Contribute your money. On the other hand, there are other people who, even though they're retired, they're on Medicare, they have a deductible. They're having to pay their deductible. They're having to pay for some of their medications. They're actually a little stretched right now. So for those people who are retired and don't need it, think about the Salvation Army. But for those who are retired but frankly are having a hard time making ends meet, and maybe they have a little job on the side, they earn just enough money to make things go, but they've been laid off, that's who those dollars are for.
Dr. Bill, one more quick one if you got time. What's the status of the second stimulus? Where are we? Where is the Senate in that pipeline?
So we're trying to come up with some sort of compromise. Pelosi put a $2 trillion bill, which actually, frankly, had some good things, but had a lot of stuff unrelated to coronavirus, just a lot of stuff. But everybody acknowledges there has to be something more. I always point out that the city of Shreveport's budget was $20 million short because of lost tax revenue due to economic shutdown. And the mayor cut the budget by $20 million, eliminating 54 police positions. Shreveport needs police officers, period, end of story. And so that's an example, though, of the kind of sacrifices local government's having to make. I'm supporting a bill that would help local and state government make up for that lost tax revenue they lost because the federal government asked them to shut down. They did. Now they need to support police, fire, and sanitation and teachers.